Welcome to this video lecture on glycemic index of foods and its uses. Myself, I am Dr. T. Indumati, Professor, Department of Biochemistry, Dr. N.G.P. Arts and Science College. In this video, we are going to learn what is meant by glycemic index, how to find the glycemic index of food, what are the factors which influences the glycemic index of food, what are the benefits of low glycemic index diet. What is meant by glycemic index? It is a scale that ranks the carbohydrates by how much they raise blood sugar levels compared to a reference food. Two foods may have the same amount of carbohydrates which may have different glycemic index number. The glycemic index number ranges from 0 to 100. Based on why the glycemic index is important. Based on the glycemic index number, which is classified into the foods of low high glycemic index foods and high glycemic index food. The foods may have high in protein or fat content have lower glycemic index. In general, the foods high in carbohydrates have high glycemic index because they break down into glucose more quickly. Lower glycemic index diet may offer health benefits for men like a reduced risk of heart disease and diabetes. How to find the glycemic index of food? The patient we can take 8 to 10 volunteers and they are supplemented with 25 or 50 grams of carbohydrate of test food. The blood sample was taken at every 1 hour interval. During the first hour, every 15 minutes the blood sample will be collected, and during second hour, every 30 minutes the blood sample will be collected, and during third hour, every 30 minutes the blood sample will be collected. All the blood samples will be analyzed and the graph will be plotted based on its value. Here the graph will be compared with the response food and test food. And the final calculation is average glycemic index of 8 to 10 volunteers is equal to that of glycemic index of test food. So in this graph, it shows there is a x-axis which is time on every 1 hour interval compared with the blood sugar level. The red color which indicates the high glycemic index. The high glycemic index, why there is a high glycemic index means the food which may rapidly digested and absorb carbohydrates. So during this rapid digestion, the high blood sugar will rise within very minimum time. The yellow color, it shows the low glycemic index because it's very slowly digested and absorbed carbohydrates. So it shows a low glycemic index at different time interval. The amount of carbohydrate in the reference and test food must be the same in low glycemic index. And glycemic index food and its uses. What does the glycemic index value mean? The glycemic index value, how it is expressed, that is explained here. The glycemic index is expressed as a ratio of comparing the blood sugar level increase caused by a test food to that of reference food for 2 hours following ingestion. So here the area under the curve of test food divided by area under the curve for reference food is multiplied with the 100. The given value, the obtained value is the glycemic index of the test food. The Brent Miller and others suggest the three categories of carbohydrate containing food based on the glycemic index. One is low glycemic index. The food may have the value of 55 or less. The most fruit, vegetables, beans, and minimally processed grains, pasta, low-fat dairy products, and nuts which are included under this low glycemic index food. The glycemic index may 0 to 55 or less than 55. And the moderate glycemic index food which ranges from the glycemic index of 56 to 69. The fruits which included under this category are white and sweet potatoes, corn, white rice, pulses, breakfast cereals such as cream of wheat and mini wheats. These are all the fruits which have moderate glycemic index. And next one is high glycemic index. The glycemic index value of food may higher than 70. White bread rice cakes, most crackers, bagels, cakes, donuts, cronuts, waffles, most packaged breakfast cereals which include under this high glycemic index foods. So many factors which influences this glycemic index of food. So what are the factors which are under this are type of starch, physical entrapment, viscosity of fiber, sugar content, fat and protein content, acid content, food processing and cooking. These are all the factors which influencing the glycemic index of food. The first factor is type of starch. Here the starch is made up of amylose and amylopectin. The amylose which absorbs less water and molecules form tight clumps and which thereby lowers the rate of digestion. But amylopectin, which absorbs more water molecules and more open faster rate of digestion. So the amylose have lower glycemic index, but the amylopectin have higher glycemic index. The kidney beans have high content of amylose, so which is highly good for the diabetes patient. And roasted potato is having high glycemic index, so it is having high composition of amylopectin. So the diabetes patient may get a kidney beans instead of roasted potato. And the second, this is about the structure of a starch. This amylopectin have a many branched molecule, but the amylose have a linear chain molecule. So this compared to the amylopectin, amylose is good for health of diabetes patient. And the second factor is physical entrapment. The bran which acts as a physical barrier and slows down the enzymatic activity on the internal starch layer. So the food which have the lower GA, that is glycemic index, are all branded pumpernickel bread, and the higher GA include bagel and cornflakes which are having higher glycemic index. The third factor which influences the glycemic index is viscosity of fiber. The viscous soluble fibers which transform intestinal content into a gel-like matter that slows down the enzymatic activity on starch. So high soluble fiber which may give lower glycemic index. So the fiber-rich foods are healthy for diabetes patients. The apple and rolled oats are classified under low glycemic index with a rich in fiber, and the whole wheat bread are classified under high glycemic index food which rich in fiber. And the fourth factor which influences the glycemic index is sugar content. So here in table, I listed out the many number of sugars with its glycemic index. So mannitol, erythritol, lactitol, sorbitol, these type of sugars have less glycemic index compared to other type of polysaccharides. The frosted flakes, raisin bran, which have a lower glycemic index, and golden harams and rice krispies, which have high glycemic index. And the fifth factor is fat and protein content. And fat and protein content slow down the gastric emptying and thus slow down the digestion of starch. High fat and protein foods which have lower glycemic index. Peanut, potato chips, special cakes which are having a lower glycemic index, and jelly beans, baked potato, cornflakes which have higher glycemic index. And next factor is acid content. Acid content slows down the gastric emptying and thus slows down the digestion of starch. So the foods with higher acid content also have lower glycemic index. Here I give an example as sort of wheat bread which have lower glycemic index and Wonder White bread which have higher glycemic index. The seventh factor is food processing. Highly processed foods require less digestive processing, but the processed foods have higher glycemic index. The patients with the risk of heart disease and diabetes, they should avoid the processed foods. The eighth factor is cooking. Cooking swells the starch molecules and softens the foods, which speeds up the rate of digestion. So the overly cooked foods also have higher glycemic index. A lower glycemic index food example is adding chapati and which is boiled for 10 to 15 minutes alone, but overcooked chapati have boiled for 20 minutes. So overall conclusion is what are the benefits of low glycemic index? Are there any documented benefits to the lowering the glycemic index of one's diet? Yes, sure. How it is benefited? Which may lower the blood glucose level, which may lower the cholesterol level, which also reduces the weight if you are taking a low glycemic index foods. So what are the other two benefits are which are lower the type 2 diabetes mellitus risk and also reduces the heart disease. So these are all the health benefits of low glycemic index food. What are the recommendations for using glycemic index in your diet? Which you must aim to include at least 3 low glycemic index food throughout the day, ideally one with each meal or snack. When eating high glycemic index foods, try to combine these with low glycemic index food in order to decrease the overall glycemic index of a meal. Not all the carbohydrates you eat need to be low glycemic index. You can take a high number of low glycemic index food, which is good to your health, which is highly recommended. Thank you all.